Hey everyone, welcome back. You know we love to go deep on the big stories everyone's talking about, and this one is huge. We're diving into social media bans, specifically those aimed at young people. And wow, you guys sent in a ton of stuff for this one. We've got academic studies, global news reports, legal analyses, even some personal stories.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. But the big question seems to be, is there a global wave of concern about social media enough to start banning it, especially for kids? So let's start with the why. Why are some governments saying enough is enough? A lot of the articles, like this one from the Internet Policy Review, are really concerned about addiction. They talk about how these platforms are designed to keep us hooked, even if it's bad for our mental health. And when you think about kids and teenagers, that's especially worrying.
Right, because their brains are still developing. They might be even more susceptible to those addictive features.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of cyberbullying, exposure to harmful content, things that most people would agree young people shouldn't be seeing. It's no wonder some governments are stepping in and trying to protect kids from the potential downsides. In fact, we've got some real-world examples of this happening right now. North Korea, for instance, has basically blocked all access to Western social media. They've got their own heavily controlled intranet, so it's a different story there. Then you've got countries like Iran, where access is really restricted, and Bangladesh just this year banned a bunch of platforms.
Wow, which ones?
Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, they're not messing around.
It makes you wonder, is this really about the kids or is it about something else?
Right. And it's not just happening in countries with a history of censorship either. Even the US and the EU are grappling with the power of these tech
Oh
giants.
yeah, remember all the controversy around TikTok and its potential ties to the Chinese government?
How could we forget?
That sparked a wave of restrictions, even bans, on government devices in several countries.
It seems like there's a real fear of what happens to our data, who has access to it, and what are they doing with it.
Exactly. And that fear, that lack of trust, it's fueling a lot of these calls for regulation. Even games haven't escaped scrutiny. Global censorship, one of the sources you shared, talks about how even Roblox has been banned in some places.
Roblox? Really? Why?
Concerns about the content, things like violence and promoting communication with strangers. The UAE banned it for that reason.
Hmm. It makes you think. Are these bans really about protecting kids? Or is it part of a larger effort to control what people can see and do online? I mean, we've talked about the reasons for these bans, the concerns about addiction, harmful content, data privacy, even national security, but it's not that simple, is it? There's another side to this story. There are a lot of people pushing back against these bans, saying, hold on, social media isn't all bad. In fact, they say it can be a powerful force for good, especially for young people. The Unplugging the Youth article really emphasizes this. They argue that for a lot of young people, social media offers a sense of connection and community they might not have offline.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about free speech. Especially here in the U.S., limiting online expression, even for kids, gets really tricky.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But the EFF article you sent over, they make a really good point. They say these bans could backfire and actually isolate kids further, especially the ones who already feel like they don't fit in. There's this quote from a teenager in the article that really got to me. They said, I'd lose the only place where I can be me.
It's true. For some young people, online spaces are where they feel safe to explore their identity, to connect with people who get them. And while protecting them from harm is crucial, limiting access to these spaces could silence their voices.
So it's a tough situation. On the one hand, we have these valid concerns about the potential harms of social media, but on the other, trying to protect young people might do more harm than good. It's like walking a tightrope. So what's the solution? Is there a middle ground here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer isn't simple. But there seems to be one thing many experts agree on:
What's that?
simply banning social media outright. That's not a real solution.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. So if bans aren't the answer, what are the alternatives? How do we address these concerns about social media's impact, especially on young people, without resorting to such extreme measures?
That's where things get really interesting. Some experts suggest focusing on strengthening privacy laws.
Strengthening privacy laws. Yeah, that seems like a good place to start, but would that actually make a difference?
It could be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Instead of banning platforms, what if we focused on giving users more control over their data?
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Imagine a world where companies couldn't track our every move online, where our data is treated as, well, ours.
Right, like that's the basic idea of privacy, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's something that a lot of folks feel is missing in the current social media landscape.
It reminds me of something I read in Unplugging the Youth, this idea of surveillance advertising. They argued that it's a huge problem.
Oh, absolutely. Surveillance advertising is everywhere, and it's at the heart of a lot of the issues with social media today.
So, for those who haven't heard of it, what is it exactly?
It's basically this system where companies gather tons of data on us, what we click on, what we like, who we interact with, and then they use that data to target us with ads.
Which is how these platforms make their money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it comes at a cost, right?
Yeah, it feels invasive, like someone's always watching.
It can feel very Big Brother-ish, very creepy.
Yeah, so how do we fix it?
Well, stricter regulations could help. If we can rein in those data collection practices, we might be able to create a healthier online environment.
Okay, so more control over our data, less surveillance advertising. Makes sense. What about age-appropriate social media platforms?
That's a big one. A lot of experts are talking about this, and the divided we fall piece goes into it in depth.
So, what's the basic idea?
Creating platforms specifically designed for younger users
Hmm.
with different features and safeguards. Think of it like a playground, but online.
Okay, with like digital guardrails.
Exactly. A space where kids can explore and connect, but with built-in protections.
So instead of just throwing kids into the deep end of the internet, we create spaces that are appropriate for their age and maturity level.
Right. These platforms could focus on positive interactions, creativity, learning, instead of just likes and followers.
It's like teaching kids good digital habits from the get-go.
Exactly. And of course, privacy would be a top priority.
So robust privacy settings by default.
Absolutely. We want to shield kids from targeted advertising and data harvesting as much as possible.
It's kind of like how we have age restrictions for things offline, right?
Exactly. You have to be a certain age to drive, to vote, to drink.
Hmm.
We recognize that some things require a certain level of maturity.
So why not apply that same logic online?
Right. And we already have some age restrictions on social media. Most platforms require users to be at least 13.
Right. But we all know kids find ways around those.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky. The banning children's social media use. Research highlights that just having age limits isn't enough.
It's like putting a lock on a door but leaving the window open.
Exactly. We need to have broader conversations about technology and its role in our lives. We need to equip young people with critical thinking skills, media literacy.
So they can navigate the digital world safely and responsibly.
Yes, it's about empowering them, not just shielding them.
So it's not just about one solution, it's about a whole bunch of things working together. Stronger privacy laws, age-appropriate platforms, digital literacy.
Exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach. And we also have to remember that technology doesn't stand still, right?
Right, always changing.
Exactly. Social media is constantly evolving. New technologies are popping up all the time. It's a moving target.
So we have to adapt too. We can't just figure it out once and be done.
Exactly. We need to stay flexible and be willing to change our approaches as the digital world changes around us.
It's like we're trying to build the airplane while we're flying it, which is kind of scary.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah,
And it's not just about the tech either. It's about our values.
right. Like, what do we care about most?
Exactly. Do we value free speech above all else, even if it means some level of risk? Or is greater regulation more important, even if it limits access or slows down innovation?
Those are tough questions.
They really are. And there's no easy answer. What works in one country might not work in another. And we have to be aware of unintended consequences.
Well, like, are we really protecting kids by restricting their access to information? Especially if online spaces are their main source of support or their only outlet for self-expression.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. It requires us to think critically, to have those difficult conversations about what we value and what kind of digital future we want to build.
So what can we do? I mean, we're not politicians or tech CEOs. How do we navigate this and make responsible choices about social media for ourselves and for kids?
That's the question, right? And I think step one is staying informed.
So do your research.
Yes. Read articles from different sources, like the ones you shared. Pay attention to the different arguments, the biases, the evidence people are presenting.
Don't just believe everything you read online, right?
Exactly. Question everything. Be wary of anyone who claims they have all the answers. And talk to each other.
Have conversations about this stuff.
Yes. With your friends, family, colleagues, share what you're learning, listen to different viewpoints.
It really feels like we're at a turning point with all of this.
We are. The choices we make now about social media, about technology, they're going to have a huge impact on the future.
It feels like a lot of pressure, but also kind of exciting.
It is. We have a voice in shaping this digital world.
Yeah.
But it starts with staying informed, engaging in these conversations, and demanding better from our leaders and from these tech companies that have so much power.
I have to say, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It's not just about social media bans. It's about so much more than that. It's about privacy. It's about freedom of expression, the power of technology, and our responsibility to use it wisely. Well, thanks for guiding us through this. It's been quite a journey.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, everyone, this conversation isn't over. We all have a part to play in shaping the digital future. So stay curious, stay engaged, and let's build something amazing together.